Hello, everyone. It's me, David Chen. Welcome to the YouTube channel. Today, we're here to talk about Jurassic World Dominion, which is out in theaters right now. Jurassic World Dominion, the sixth film in one of the most successful sci fi franchises of all time. And it's got a lot going for it. It's got dinosaurs. This one in particular has both the old cast and the new cast coming together. It's a recipe for unmitigated success. Here to talk with me today about whether that success has actually occurred. He's a culture writer whose work has appeared at rogerebert.com, and you can find him on Twitter at Metaplex Movies. Brendan Hodges, welcome back to the channel. How's it going today, Brendan?
It is amazing. I'm super excited to talk to you about Jurassic World Dominion.
So we are in full spoilers for Jurassic World Dominion. Don't listen to this conversation unless you want to be spoiled, because we need to be able to talk freely about this movie. So all that said, Brendan, as I said, this movie seemed to have a lot going for it. A really talented cast that brings together a bunch of characters that we've known across all films. And it has high quality CG dinosaur creations. So how could you go wrong with this? Did they go wrong with it? What'd you think of the movie?
Oh my gosh. I went into the movie not particularly a fan of the last two Jurassic films, Colin Trevorrow's first Jurassic World and then Jay Biona's Fallen Kingdom, but I expected at least some good dino fun, Dave. I really was excited. I was like, how bad can this be? I know the reviews weren't amazing, but I'm sure I'll have a good time. What I didn't count on was the fact that to my actual shock and disappointment, as low as my expectations already were, most disappointing of all, I was just really, really bored the whole movie for the most part. There's maybe two little set pieces that I enjoyed. The rest of the movie, I hate to confess, I just checked out. And there were big sections of it I just thought were frankly pretty abysmal. It really, to me, represents everything wrong with franchise filmmaking. And even though I went in with pretty low expectations, it somehow was a big disappointment anyway.
I would say this movie is half of a fun movie, right? The half being actually exploring the world that Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom sets up. At the end of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, spoilers for that movie as well, obviously, the idea is that the clone girl has released the dinosaurs into the human ecosystem. They've gotten loose, and now mankind must compete against another set of creatures to become the apex predator or what have you. And it's like, oh, interesting. This is the first time in the Jurassic Park franchise where they have actually significantly reset the status quo. Because every single Jurassic Park movie has basically been, to a large degree, a remake of the previous movie, right? It's basically, hey, there's dinosaurs in this park / island / whatever, and they get out or they get loose, and we have, like, humans need to run away in order to survive. Now, Fallen Kingdom does play around a little bit with this idea of like this auction, and they're brought to like the mainland, and so that started to remix the status quo, the main sort of plot a little bit. And then it's like the setup is super intriguing. What would life be like if dinosaurs actually roamed the earth again? Unfortunately, half of this movie is not about that topic, right? The first half, which takes place in the mainland and in Malta, is like, oh yeah, let's think through what would actually happen if there were dinosaurs on Earth, and it would probably be pretty catastrophic. We would integrate them into our life somehow. They would set up nests at the top of skyscrapers. People would gamble on them and sell them in underground markets. Like there's all this stuff that is kind of fun and interesting and goofy and silly and campy. And it's like, oh, that's kind of what I was hoping from this movie. And if the whole movie had been that, I would have had a great time, I think. I wouldn't have loved it in the same way I loved Jurassic Park 1, but I would have said that's a fun movie. But half of the movie is about a plot that no one cares about. Like, I don't know of a single person that gives a crap about genetically engineered locusts eating up a ton of crops. Yes, they're from prehistoric times, but they basically sidelined the dinosaur plot completely, and it is deathly to this movie. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. The thing is that it, look, before I go into this, I want to say a line up front that my friends roll their eyes at me whenever I say it, but I always say this line to really express movies are dreams. They don't have to make sense. They have every movie, every one of them was full of plot holes and contrivances and coincidence, and that's fine. That's great. I'm on board with that. Star Wars, the original Star Wars, is full of plot holes and nobody talks about it. You know why? Because that movie kicks ass. It's an amazing movie. We don't care that they lead them straight to the rebel base when they know they're being tracked. That's not important to us. It's a great movie. I bring this up because nothing in this movie makes sense. Not a thing. And you bring up the locust plot, but before I even get to that, I think it actually has a bigger issue. You said 50% of the movie is really about this dinosaur world. And look, I understand that you're probably a charitable person, Dave, and you want to, be benevolent, but I think that's grossly overestimated. Mm-hmm. And I say
most people do not call me charitable, by the way, but yes.
Okay. Take the compliment. And,
yes.
But I say this because the movie not only sidelines the dinosaurs in the locusts plot, it really sidelines the dinosaurs in the dinosaurs plot. Mm-hmm. And none of it makes sense from frame one. From the opening of the movie, it does not actually, number one, put the stakes of the story in front of us in a way that we can care about. But number two, the logic of how they bridge the second to third movie don't make sense. One example is that the second movie, the whole point of the film was that there was like a Noah's Ark to getting the dinosaurs off the island. And suddenly, in a pretty short span of time, we have tons of fully grown dinosaurs everywhere on Earth. And this would create actually a fascinating opportunity to ask what would happen if there were dinosaurs everywhere on Earth. Not these 11 species from Fallen Kingdom, but apparently tons of species and tons of species.
Life finds a way, Brendan.
Life finds a way. Exactly. So, and yet the movie gives us an opening montage of this weird thing where they jumped the logic they set up to begin with, and they don't even give us the courtesy of having fun with it. That was one of the first things that I experienced in the movie that made me go, oh no. If they've introduced this absurd premise and they don't even know how to integrate that into the story, how are they going to make do with what they even are working with? Which ultimately, the dinosaur plotline is about chasing a clone girl whose mom we never met. She's dead when we first meet her, the daughter. And then her grandfather is also a character we had never met before. So we have no emotional attachment to this character whatsoever, right? Mm-hmm. And the whole movie is about two things. It's about saving a clone girl that we probably don't care about. And two, it's about the locust plot. In both of these situations, the dinosaurs become kind of window dressing.
Yes. So a couple of things. First of all, I think you're referring to the opening of the film, which is like kind of a Now This, which is an actual news organization giving a summary of dinosaurs being on Earth. And it sounds like your complaint is that it wasn't very fun. It was very clinical and exposition-y.
My complaint is that it makes a massive leap of logic from the way the last movie ended to this one. But my issue is not
the logic being what, that there's now a ton of dinosaurs, or
because the end of the of Fallen Kingdom is like it makes
there's like 30 dinosaurs.
There's like a couple. Really, if you watch the end of it, and I made the mistake of watching it right before I watched it. There's like not that many dinosaurs they take off the island. But Dave, that's not my issue. My issue is they made a logic leap and didn't do anything with it. That's the bigger problem. I want to be clear. I'm fine with it not making sense, right?
Well, okay. I think you're a couple of things. Okay. I've seen people make this complaint too, and I think the end of Fallen Kingdom already sets up the idea that the dinosaurs have proliferated, right? So that they're all over the world somehow, that they've spread everywhere. So like, I don't feel like that's a big leap. And also, you said it doesn't do anything with it. Brendan, I did not like this movie at all. I think it's
Yeah.
terrible, but it does some things with it. It doesn't do that much of it, but it does some things with it. Like all that stuff I said, all the Malta stuff, I think is a lot of fun, to be honest with you.
I
So it
actually
doesn't,
like that
yeah, yeah.
That's my
So
favorite stretch of the movie,
so that's
personally.
kind of like the movie imagining, hey, what would happen if there were dinosaurs in our world, right? There would be
Yeah.
underground fighting rings and there would be black market dinosaur sales, and maybe we'd figure out a way to weaponize the dinosaurs. It's like them throwing all those ideas into that Malta action scene bucket.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's actually pretty fun. Now, I don't think it
I
lasts
love, but
nearly.
just to cut you off real quick,
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
the Bourne-esque
Yes.
chase
Born
scene.
Ultimatum, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually a terrific action scene.
Yes.
However, I will ask you one question. This is a long movie. It's a 2.5 hour long movie. How
Yeah.
much of that 2.5 hour long movie do you think is the Malta sequence?
Like 30 minutes. 30 minutes
Tops.
tops.
Yeah, tops.
Yeah.
So I think you kind of see my point.
Yes,
right?
but you are being very categorical with your pronouncements, and I'm like, okay, I agree that the movie is overall very bad, but
Yeah.
let us give them some credit where credit
Yeah.
is due. That they did do a handful of interesting things, and most of that stuff takes place in Malta, right?
Yeah, it
But
does.
the problem with the movie is it feels like they started with what they wanted the end state to be, and they pretzel twisted the plot to make it so that all the things converged at Biosyn, which, by the way, laughably cartoonishly evil name. You want here it's like almost like Mad Libs or like set of criteria for the ending of the film. What do you need? You need Owen and Claire, who continue to be a couple that has zero on-screen chemistry, and where there's a charisma vacuum in between them. It's really it is truly a situation where I have opinions may differ on the level of talent that Bryce Dallas Howard and Chris Pratt have. I think they're both quite talented actors. They're both attractive human beings. This is truly a situation where it is way, way less than the sum of their parts. Like, you have two talented people, you put them together, the result is something way worse than literally either one of them individually would be able to deliver, I think. So that's unfortunate. But anyway, you want Claire and Owen together there. And you want the original cast to go, right? The Ellie and Dr. Grant and Ian Malcolm. You want them to be you want them all to converge in the same place, and it needs to be something where they care about, like Owen and Claire care about, like what's going on. It's something personal for them. In this case, clone daughter, and also it has to have dinosaurs in it. And they're like, they wrote this kind of second half of the movie. They're like, it needs to have all these ingredients. How do we make it so that it has all these ingredients? And it's like, well, for Dr. Grant, it's got to be locusts that gets him into the mix. And then for Claire and Owen, it's got to be clone daughter and blue. And why does BD Wong need both of them? Reasons. Hand wavy reasons that, like, he needs both of them. He needs both of them in order to get rid of the locusts. And it feels so. It very much feels to me like you're seeing that they're trying to get to this ending, and they twist everything to get to the ending, and as a result, the plot feels ludicrous and very, events feel super disconnected from each other. So
yeah, it feels very modular in the sense where they had a
Mhm.
lot of individual scene ideas, and whether it was Trevorrow, and I forget the name of his writing partner, or any other writer that might have assisted on the film, they couldn't come up with how to bridge those gaps, or how to make they talk about, you make a movie by getting a bunch of scenes. When you have so many scenes, you've got a movie. That's true, but at some point the scenes should transition, and it doesn't really do that. And this really dovetails with what I was saying before about how the dinosaurs weirdly aren't really the focus. Even in Malta, and to be clear, that is my favorite stretch of the movie.
Yeah.
The dinosaurs are very much seen quite literally in passing by the characters. That is, if you think about the plot of most of the Jurassic movies, the dinosaurs and the plot are not separate. They overlap. There's no way to disconnect them. And if you take the dinosaurs out of Malta, Owen and Claire's plotline in Malta does not change. The
Mm-hmm.
dinosaurs have nothing to do with it. They basically are the equivalent of soldiers in that scene, right? Or like wild
Mm-hmm.
animals. There's nothing dinosaur-y about how they're particularly used. And that's very much unlike the other movies. And they just look at them as they walk past. And that's fine. Some of those bits are pretty novel and pretty cool. And I would have liked a lot more of them in the movie. But it just really shows that the central threat of the movie, and I think this is the main issue with the plot, is not about dinosaurs. That has nothing to do with dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And I think most people, and Dave, you can tell me what your experience was. Most people, I think, went into this movie thinking the plot of the movie was about dinosaurs in the world. How would they contain the dinosaurs? How would they coexist or not coexist? Would the T-Rex eat people out of a Best Buy? I don't know. It would be, how does all of that work?
There is a reason why almost none. I don't think can find any of the marketing, like in the trailers or the clips, that mention the locust subplot. Or
Yeah.
I guess you could say plot, because it is the main.
It's the A plot of the movie, yeah.
It's the A plot. It's the A plot, right? But there's a reason none of the marketing mentions it, because it's a terrible plot. It feels like it has no stakes, right? Like, yes, the world might get destroyed and Monsanto might, engineer these crops that everyone needs to buy or whatever. But like, who gives a crap when there's dinosaurs roaming the earth? Like that feels like it's the more pressing issue than genetically engineered crops. It feels extremely kind of cerebral for a movie whose thrills should be more visceral and fun and campy.
Yeah.
There is a reason why they've chosen. Like, this is why I rarely get angry at movies. Like, I often don't like movies, but it's rare that I like get actually angry at films. And I'm angry at this movie because what they're selling is not the movie. Like, it is extremely deceptive. And it feels like the people marketing this movie knew that it was a stinker, and knew that at least half of the movie or 3/4 of the movie had a plot that no one would care about. And so they chose to deliberately hide that plot from the public.
Yeah.
And obviously the movie is doing very well, and it has an A- cinema score, so enough people like it. But I will just say that plot is terrible. And Colin Trevorrow has talked about why he did the plot that way. He wanted to honor what Michael Crichton was trying to do with the franchise. And I just have to say, we are decades away from the creation of Jurassic Park 1. And I don't feel like honoring Michael Crichton needs to be top on the priority list at this point. Like, the franchise has gone through so many changes. Just make a fun movie, man. Just make a fun movie. An act at which I think the filmmakers and everyone behind this thing unfortunately failed.
Yeah.
So, and largely because the second half of the movie just feels really like there's very little to emotionally attach onto. Like, you don't really care about the outcome of this locust thing. So all that's left is the nostalgia and the joy of seeing these characters get together. What did you think, Brendan, of seeing the original cast together again?
Not much. And to be clear, and I know you're in the same boat, I adore the first movie. Like,
Yes.
Spielberg is probably my favorite working filmmaker. I'm a massive Spielberg person. I think he's weirdly underrated despite being one of the greatest living filmmakers, and I'll go to bat for the guy any day of the week. I say this because there's part of my brain that should be involuntarily excited when I see these characters on screen. And like in the middle of Rise of Skywalker, which I'll make more comparisons to later, I thought that movie was terrible. When Harrison Ford popped up, I was involuntarily excited. Harrison Ford is here, It was a sad scene, and he played it beautifully, and it was a lot of people spoke that was a highlight of the movie. I had none of that serotonin watching this movie. And actually, I'll make another Star Wars comparison. I want to compare this movie to The Force Awakens. Because in The Force Awakens, they did what I know a lot of people have issues with that movie, but it did one thing really, really well, which is every single time it introduces the Force, Luke's old lightsaber, the Falcon, Harrison Ford on screen, Leia on screen. It made it a moment with a capital M. It made this really special. There was build up, and the movie created space in the narrative for it to be special. And this movie, we meet these characters in like medium shots doing nothing, and we just smash cut to them. There's no build up, there's no intrigue, there's no emotion, and it was very dispiriting. And I really knew that like he had no idea what he was doing as a filmmaker when we meet Laura Dern, and it does the same camera move as the dinosaur. Like when she sees the dinosaur, she like takes the glass and she like stands up, and it's like meant to be very evocative. And it's, I get what he was trying to do, like a foil where it's like, oh, instead of wonder, now she's looking at dead farms. Okay.
Crops. She's looking at crops now.
She's looking at crops now. But it's not, and that would be fine if it was captured any emotion, but it's just so flat. And I was just very disappointed how just of a non-entity they were. And if you cut them out of the movie, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, if you cut them out of the movie, nothing would change. Not a single way the movie ends up would change. Quite literally. I mean, because the clone daughter got herself free already, and the one character was already helping. So, and the whole point of why they broke in was to get the sample, but they wound up like not. I don't think they needed the sample. So,
I don't. Yeah, I mean, it's very likely that they had a minimal impact to the actual plot of the movie. Right?
Yeah,
but I think that there's a comparison to be made. This set of Jurassic World movies is like the sequel trilogy for Star Wars, right? Jurassic World, very much like The Force Awakens, reintroduces the entire franchise for a new generation, whole new set of characters, refers to some of the old stuff that happened with awe and wonder. Then you have a second film, Fallen Kingdom, and The Last Jedi, which shake up the status quo and open up the entire world of possibilities for a really brave and daring third film. And in the case of Rise of Skywalker and this movie, they both completely squandered the potential and decided to instead lean on nostalgia.
Yeah.
And I will say, just to be clear, I think the Star Wars movies are way superior to the Jurassic World. Like, if you ask me, hey, you must watch, one trilogy over another, I would choose Star Wars every single time. Don't love all those movies, but I think overall they're much better made and much more satisfying, those three films in the Star Wars trilogy, like the sequel trilogy, than the Jurassic World movies. But I do think that they do have this weird echo of each other, and in some ways encapsulate how it's difficult to make a sequel trilogy of anything, So...
No, I agree. And the comparisons get eerie with Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
Both movies...
Which Colin Trevorrow almost directed.
Yeah, right? Correct. Yeah. And obviously he has a script that's out in the wild and so on and so forth. And the thing about it is both Rise of Skywalker and Dominion feel to me as though the filmmakers sat down and said, we need all this stuff. We need to check all the boxes from all the previous things.
Yes.
And for example, I happen to not think Rise of Skywalker was trying to rewrite The Last Jedi, intentionally, anyway.
Interesting.
And I don't think it was. I think it has many problems. I don't like that movie. But I think that mostly it didn't understand The Last Jedi. And I also think it happened to not understand The Force Awakens, which is kind of wild because JJ did both movies. But I say this because to me it was like, oh, we need to have this character come back. Oh, we need to pay off this thing from this other movie. And, oh, we need a reference to the prequels now. It's like, in a premeditated way, more concerned with checking off how to tie everything up as a franchise than trying to be a movie that's functional and has narrative and is good. And I think this comes full circle to what we talked about at the very beginning, which is this idea of paying off what was set up to us, whether that was in the previous films or the marketing. This movie fundamentally has no idea how to handle setups and payoffs. If someone were to ask me, Brendan, what's one of the most important things about screenwriting for an action film? I think it's true for every movie. It's setups and payoffs. That's what it is. You set up all the dominoes so the third act can come knock them all down. Nobody does this better than James Cameron, right? He shows us the power loader in the first act of Aliens so it can come back in the third act. Then it's like, oh, the power loader, we get excited. This movie does not set anything up, and therefore it cannot pay anything off, unfortunately. And I think when you talk about the third act being hollow, it's because the third act is, you mentioned all the previous Jurassic movies are recreating the previous Jurassic films. Well, that's what the third act does, right? Dr. Ellie Sattler even goes and has to turn the power thing back on. And it's recreating those beats, but that's discontinuous with the rest of the movie. It's not paying off the first 2 hours or so of the previous film. It's trying to pay off the previous 5 movies very, very badly. And I don't know about you. I just checked out during all of that. And I know some people enjoyed that section the most, but I could not find...
Which section are you referring to specifically?
Just that I would say that once the cast, like the two storylines converge, to the end, what I said a minute ago, in Force Awakens, all these moments are important. Well, in The Last Jedi, when Leia and Luke meet, and Luke and Kylo Ren meet, oh my gosh, it's so special.
Yes.
And in this movie, when
the movie comes to life, you know what I mean? Yeah.
And in this movie, when they meet, it's like, hey, I read a book. I read a book that you wrote, man. That was a cool book. Yeah. And it's like so it's like just try harder.
Dr. Grant saying to BD Wong, I know you, and like that's it, And it's just like it feels like it's running through a bunch of different plot points it needs to check off, basically.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious for how you felt about this, but what moments after Malta did you feel came alive, to use your phrase? Like, what moments popped?
There's a handful of cool stuff. I thought the stuff with Bryce Dallas Howard trying to run away from the dinosaur and going underwater.
Yeah.
That's like a cool moment.
Yeah,
cool moment.
Shot in there.
Cool shot. That's about it. And also, you were talking about setups and payoffs. I would agree that there's not that much setup and paid off. There is the idea of the Gigantosaurus, I think it is what it is. And so there's, every single one of these movies feels the need. It's so frustrating. Like the first movie, Jurassic Park 1, sets up an incredible quote unquote villain, right? The Velociraptor. It's like, this is the most badass creature of all time. And then every single subsequent movie feels like it needs to one up that. It's like, oh, we can't just have Velociraptors and T-Rexes. We gotta have 2 T-Rexes, or we gotta have Allosaur or Indoraptor or what have you. And it's just like, it's boring. It's boring. First of all, you set up this creature as like the most badass creature imaginable, and they're then they're flummoxed by these clumsy humans every single movie, right? So it's like, why bother setting them up as super badass if like the fundamental premise of that's not paid off?
Yeah.
But in this case, it's in this case, they do kind of set up, oh, here's the most badass thing of all time, which then proceeds again to be stymied by some very basic running away and climbing up ladders and stuff like that. There was a cool moment when like, here's what I will say. There's a handful of neat visuals in the movie. We talked about the Bryce Dallas Howard underwater scene. There's that moment when the dinosaur like clamps its jaws around the ladder and you see it from the opposite perspective. And that's cool. Like a really cool shot, Yeah. And so there's a handful of that kind of stuff. It's not completely devoid of any thrills at all.
The fiery locust visuals are really cool.
Yeah.
I thought,
like falling from the sky, and that's kind of scary. So yeah, there is some cool stuff in the movie. It's not just like a total loss.
Yeah.
But it is a complete waste of the potential, which is you have all the cast you could want. You have dinosaurs roaming amongst mankind. And you just waste. You first of all, what they did was they recreated the conditions of the first 5 movies, right? Which is we have the dinosaurs segregated off into their own space. It's like, well, the thing I wanted to watch this movie for was so to not see that, right?
Yeah.
I literally have already seen that 5 times already. So I want them to be in the world, and how are you dealing with them in the world, and all the interesting questions that does. Then thematically, the movie's a mess. Every single movie has tried to make some point about don't mess with nature, right? And then the people go back and they mess with nature again. This movie is particularly egregious because the solution to the genetically engineered locusts, more genetic engineering. gotta genetically engineer the locusts again, somehow even better than the first time. It's like, well, not great. Not a lot of self-awareness in the thematic consistency there. You know what I mean?
Well, not just that, but the ending of Fallen Kingdom introduces the dinosaurs in the world, and there's this whole voiceover for how there must be some kind of status quo of coexistence.
Mm-hmm.
And the third film does the most egregious example of the Seinfeld yada yada I've really encountered in modern cinema for some time, where it's like all these concerns we had about how dinosaurs will exist in the world. They're like, dinosaurs come into the world. There's way more of them than were in Fallen Kingdom. Yada, yada, yada. Coexistence at the very end. And none of the previous film was actually about that at all.
Yeah, 100% correct there. And basically, the status quo at the end of Dominion is the same as the status quo at the end of Fallen Kingdom. And it's
we've never seen how the world is trying to integrate.
It doesn't.
It's withheld from us.
It completely wastes the premise. And similar to Rise of Skywalker, I would say one of the biggest crimes of that film and the biggest crimes of this film are that it leans on just referring to stuff that already happened before. Bringing back old cast members. Or, in the case of this movie, bringing back old characters, like Dodgson. And this reaches its zenith when they see that Barbasol can. It's like somehow, I think we're meant to believe that Dodgson went back to the first island somehow and recovered those embryos. And it's like, okay, yeah, fine, whatever. By that point in the movie, that's like 2 hours and 15 minutes into the movie. You're like, whatever, who cares? But the movie refuses to tread any new ground thematically, unfortunately, other than some basic idea, ineffectively rendered idea of don't mess with nature. Biosyn, they mess with nature in a different way than John Hammond did, but in a much more boring way, and they paid for it. So,
yeah, 100%. And what I think is really weird, again, on that topic of setup and payoff, you're talking about how the movie keeps going back to the old hits, and Trevorrow's more of a cover band than, a new artist in that sense. Well, the weird thing is that Jurassic World 1 and 2 and 3 are ultimately about two things for the most part, two main plots. The first is the militarization of dinosaurs, which we barely see in this movie. We get a 15-minute long set piece. Which is admittedly
kind of cool.
It's kind of cool,
but kind of cool. Yeah,
brief. Also,
when
hokey.
she's like laser painting the dinosaurs, right?
Yeah. Even if they can't see where the laser's pointing all the time, it's not important. But the point is that this 3-movie arc of this militarization of dinosaurs is paid off with laser pointing raptors, which is not the most satisfying,
and without exploring any of the implications of that,
not at all. And that was like a major thing it was setting up. And the third element it doesn't pay off is that Jurassic World 1 and 2 are all both about these hybrid dinosaurs. And I understand the idea that this leads to locusts, but you would think that the main threat of the film, this Giganosaurus, whatever the name is, you would think that the antagonist, the quote unquote dinosaur antagonist of the movie, would also have been a hybrid dinosaur that perhaps would have done things differently than the other dinosaurs do in the movie. I mean, that's like, there's the Indoraptor, and then I forget the name of the one in the Jurassic World one, but they're all these genetically modified hybrid dinosaurs, and that just dropped in this movie for the dinosaurs themselves. And I thought that was weird.
Indominus Rex, by the way, was the one in Jurassic World. Yeah,
forgive me. And the weird thing about it is, like, if you're gonna try to spice it up, this seems like low hanging fruit to pay off that theme somehow. And this was all his own stuff. This was all set up in the first movie, and it just didn't do anything with it. And
What is the it that you wish it had done something with?
I wish that it mostly just integrated these ideas into the movie somehow, where there was a payoff. Anything, not to be an armchair screenwriter, but anything from having another hybrid dinosaur that somehow went wrong, or in a deadly way, and maybe a hybrid dinosaur mutated above how they thought they could control it, and then that destroyed most of the scientists. I don't know. Anything would be better than
my
nothing.
expectations were not nearly that high. My expectations were, I was not expecting it to explore what is genetically engineering dinosaurs and what that might do, and the idea of clones. I'm just like, I don't expect it to tackle any of that stuff in any meaningful way.
Yeah.
All I want is some fun dinosaur thrills. And this movie was mostly lacking on that front, unfortunately.
Yeah. And what's weird, and I briefly talked about this on Twitter, but the thing is that if you think to almost all action scenes in all 3 Jurassic World movies, not all, but almost all of them, character gets in danger, big dino chase human, and then they get out of danger because a bigger, badder, meaner dino comes and saves the day. And
so there's not much in terms of like the humans outwitting or defeating the dinosaurs.
The closest we really get is they motorcycle onto a plane, which admittedly cool, but it isn't exactly ingenuity, right? And
okay, Brendan, I think you're forgetting Owen Grady doing this.
Oh yeah, that's right.
He's got this move. He's like,
yeah,
that solves all his problems.
His raptor mind trick.
Yeah, he goes to this and it's all set. So I didn't hear you bring that up. So I don't think you're really giving this movie a fair shake.
I truly, you're correct. I'm humbled.
Yes.
And it's just the thing is, like, we talk about how the characters aren't very interesting. I think that has as much to do with how the scenes are constructed as characterization. I always think about Christopher Nolan talking about the movie Psycho, about how when Norman Bates is hiding the vehicle after the murder, that we're worried about someone seeing the car. Suddenly in that scene, because it's played as suspense, weirdly, because our point of view is his point of view, it switches to us caring about him, because situational stakes somehow can sometimes go beyond moral or emotional attachment or stakes. And this happens all the time. And he talked about this when he made Dunkirk, about how that movie is all about situational investment of how characters behave. I say that because these movies don't do that. And Jurassic Park did it all the time. It's so much about how a character will react in a situation. How will they get themselves out of a situation? Will they be outsmarted by a raptor? Clever girl and all that.
Yeah.
How are they going to react? This movie doesn't do that. More often than not, the human characters are completely passive. Therefore, there is no suspense. There's no strong point of view. We're just watching them get saved by other stuff. It kind of, to me, feels like a theme park ride, but instead of it being you in the car, you're seeing the car in the theme park ride in front of you, and you're watching them evade the theme park attraction, dinosaurs or whatever, and it's not even happening to you. You're watching it happen to them. So you just check out. There's nothing to care about.
Interesting. I mean, when you're watching any Jurassic Park movie, though, aren't you watching it happen to someone else? But I think what you're saying is that those other films do a better job of placing you subjectively into the character's perspective.
Exactly. And not just subjectively into their perspective, but you're with them like, oh, how are they going to get out of this one, kind of a thing. Did we ever ask how Owen Grady's going to get out? No, dinosaur's going to come
again. Brendan,
I know, or he might do this.
He does the thing. So I feel like you're not acknowledging that. But there is a scene in the movie when Owen Grady and Claire, they team up with Kayla Watts, who is a much more interesting character than anyone else in this film. And it's like, wow, why wasn't the movie about that character? Huge miss. And he's asking her, hey, why are you helping us? Why are you like endangering yourself and your livelihood just to help some girl you've never heard of? And she says, do you want answers or do you want a ride? And I feel like that's kind of what the movie is posing to us.
Yeah.
Is, do you want intellectual stimulation or do you want to just be along for the ride? And actually, until that point, I was cool with the ride. But then it really went downhill after that, that scene.
Yeah.
So any closing thoughts, Brendan, on Jurassic World Dominion?
Look, man, I really think that this movie would have been way, way, way stronger. And I think there's a problem with a lot of blockbusters these days. If it just simplified everything, if we think back to like the best blockbusters of all time, the vast majority of them, you know what they have in common? They're simple. They're not simplistic. They're simple. They're elegant in how they function. We think Raiders, Die Hard, right? Aliens. I mean, even The Dark Knight, which is a long runtime, it has an intricate plot. That movie is really a series where about every 10, 15 minutes, there's a 20 to 30 minute long set piece. And it repeats the whole movie. Mm-hmm. That's the structure of The Dark Knight. It's very simple. And very few movies benefit from being overcomplicated. Some pull it off. Most do not. And I feel like this movie was trying to outsmart itself on every level while also fundamentally not having a clue how to make us care about anything, but especially the characters and especially giving us goals that we can invest in. It wildly overestimates how much we'll care about Blue or the clone girl or Owen or Claire, etc. So those are my closing thoughts.
One of the reasons that people continue to turn out for these Jurassic World movies in huge numbers is because Jurassic Park and Jurassic World, these movies, offer us something no other movies can, which is dinosaurs living in our world. Like, there's no other movies that are coming out these days that have that. It's like James Bond or, so basically a franchise or Fast Furious, where it's like, if you want thrilling car chase scenes, like, or John Wick, if you want like gun kata, like, you got to go to John Wick. If you want cool car chase sequences or, car wild action scenes, it's got to be the Fast franchise. Like, the Jurassic World series offers us something nothing else can, which is dinosaurs living in our real world. And there's so much fun potential for that. And this movie so fundamentally misunderstands why it is we go to see these movies, which is we're trying to see people not get eaten by dinosaurs. And that's it. That's it. And the movie is like, what if it was about genetically engineered locusts and Monsanto style, crops being taken over the world? And it's like, no one gives a crap. And for those reasons, huge disappointment and an ignominious end for, I'm not even going to say a great franchise. I'm going to say a great franchise, a franchise that started with one great movie and has led to 5 mediocre to terrible ones, of which this is, I would say, the worst one.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right. Well, folks, that's going to bring us to the end of this conversation. Brendan Hodges can be found on Twitter at Metaplex Movies. Brendan, I want to say thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always a blast talking to you.
I want to say a big thank you to all the patrons of mine at patreon.com/Dave Chen for making my work possible. Big shout out to all you folks. If you want to sign up for bonus audio episodes as well as access to my office hours, patreon.com/Dave Chen is how you do it. And until the next time, we'll see you later.